Hey everybody, it's Kent Davis. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about renting properties in Panama. We're going to talk about prices, we're going to talk about pitfalls and what to watch out for, and also what is different about renting in Panama versus renting in other parts of the world. So to get started, I would say that this general observation or guidance applies to both beach property, mountain property, and city properties. So to get started, the Panama real estate rental game. What can you expect? Well, you can expect that right now, today, prices are probably going to be negotiable. Now, granted, every now and then you run into an owner who's just trying to burn it out. Not to say that the market is particularly soft, but by the same token, it's not overheated, which means that there are not people standing up, overbidding properties. For example, in parts of the United States, that's happening, and other markets around the world, not so in Panama. So that's the first takeaway, is everything is negotiable. In terms of pricing, we found that generally a furnished property is going to be about 10% more. So figure $1,000 a month unfurnished, $1,100 a month furnished. That's a really kind of quick and fast, quick and dirty example, but I would say 10% is a good general rule of thumb in terms of price differences. Now, you are going to find a lot of furnished rentals. That said, you might find that the standard to which some of them are furnished are not necessarily equal to, say, the property itself. You might find a beautiful $1 million property with not so nice furniture. So advice there would be perhaps to consider there's a couple options now of renting furniture. You can talk to our friends over at Deja Vu for used furniture as well. They do a great job, and there are quite a few options in terms of new furniture to be purchased in Panama. So I wouldn't say let that be a limiting factor. There's also always a secondary market if you need to sell your furniture. So what about the rental process? Well, it's fairly similar to the US. They do require, for example, the first and last month, the last month being security deposit. You can't necessarily use that last month to pay the last month's pay. In other words, you're renting a property. Again, $1,000 a month, you're going to be putting down $2,000. So that's going to cover the first month's rent and also the security deposit of the same amount. So what else? In terms of the contract, generally, contracts run for 12 months at a time. They are extendable, say 6 months, 12 months. Sometimes they go month to month after they expire. That's actually the law. Unless it gets formally rescinded by both parties, then it's off to the drawing board and start over and sign a new lease. So leases, again, typically 12 months. So let's talk about landlords for a second. Landlords in Panama, kind of hit or miss. If you get a good, aggressive property manager, they're going to do a great job keeping up the property, responding to requests, advising the owner of what needs to be done, versus absentee owners who might live in other parts of the country, hard to get a hold of, not necessarily super excited about fixing things. So beware. That's a good vetting question is, hey, who's managing the property? Is it the owner? Where do they live? Do they speak Spanish? Because if they don't speak Spanish, plan on some annoyances with plumbers and electricians. They might have the same guy who tries to fix everything. That's never a good thing. So do a little due diligence. Ask your agent. Or if you're renting directly, which, happens, there are advantages to having agents. Of course, we advise on the wording of the contract. We advise on due diligence questions to ask. We advise on market pricing, sort of comps. I mean, it's having an expert along the way. Typical commissions are the first month's rent, just so you know. The owner is going to be paying that. So there's no additional cost to using an owner as a tenant or a prospective tenant. What else can I tell you about the real estate market in terms of rentals? Golly, there are some great sources online for rental listings, a directory. We have a very comprehensive website. Of course, by all means, PanamaEquity.com, come on by. If you're looking for something specific and don't see it on our website, It doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't exist, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't help you find it. So engage us, right? And say, hey, I have this budget and I want this. I didn't see it on your site. And of course, we work with all the agencies in Panama. There are actually a few developers who are now renting. That's an interesting subject to talk about as well. Lease to own. Typically, a lease to own is going to have a couple components. You're going to want to say, okay, well, I'll rent it for this, but how much of my rent is going to apply to the purchase price? How long do I have to make a decision? And do I have to pay for, it's essentially an option. You're saying, hey, I want the option to be the first guy that can buy this property. So Mr. Seller or Mr. Owner, I don't want you to sell this to anybody else while I'm renting. And I want to agree on the price now and perhaps even pay you something to hold that option. And also while I'm paying your rent, having it accrue towards a purchase price that we agree upon. And that's, lease to own, alquiler con la opción a compra is what it's called in Panama. Rent, that's how you say it. It's verbatim, lease option, or yeah. So those exist in Panama. Now, if you go in specifically looking for those, you're going to want to start with properties for sale at that point, because a lot of times landlords are not necessarily going to be super interested in selling versus sellers who might be interested in saying, okay, well, maybe my deal is going to take 6 months. Maybe my deal is going to take 12 months to execute the sale. But that's a little bit off the subject, but kind of on the subject of rents in Panama. What else can I tell you? We always answer questions. That's what we do. We've been doing this since, 2007. So we've closed a lot of rental deals. We also manage a lot of properties. You want to make sure that your property manager is on point. Of course, if we're managing the property, then you got nothing to worry about there. A good property manager is going to be, like I said earlier, in touch with the owner, advising the owner appropriately, available for the tenant, and really just an advocate for both sides at that point. I think that pretty well sums it up. We can get into the details of what a contract looks like, but it's a pretty typical lease agreement. Don't expect owners to do a whole lot in terms of improvements while you're there. They will be expected to pay the homeowners association. As a tenant, you're going to be expected to pay the electricity and other utilities, including internet. However, is that a utility these days? That said, typically an owner is going to pay the water, which is included with the sewer in one bill. So that's going to be on the seller or the owner in this case. But read the fine print, ask your agent, make sure that's the case. While water bills and sewer bills are typically anywhere from $30 to $50 a month combined, that's an extra expense that a tenant might have to pay. What else? I think that's it, guys. So there you go. Thanks for watching.